And hello, everybody. VParty here for the VPartySports Podcast, NCAA football preview show for this coming weekend, Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening. Lots of NCAA action. We're about 2 weeks away from Thanksgiving weekend. The last few weekends of NCAA football, determining bowl bids, BCS championship bids, all that action going on with the NCAA college football games for this week. It is week 11. As we said. So we're sponsored by the Brit Sports Pub and Patio, downtown San Jose. We'll do a live broadcast every Sunday from the Brit Sports Pub and Patio in downtown San Jose near the arena. Come in and mention the VPartySports Podcast. Receive 10% off your entire bill during the NFL Sunday tickets. So the early games, the afternoon games, from 10 o'clock till about 4 o'clock for all the games that are on Sunday ticket. Come in, mention the podcast, and you'll have 10% off your entire bill. All right, let's get started here. We got college football to get to here. The NCAA top 25 right now. Let's look at the games that are going to be taking place so far this weekend. We'll go in order for the top 25, and then we'll hit all the conferences. Georgia at number 1 after their beating of Tennessee last week. They are at Mississippi State. They are about a 16-point underdog. And get these lines to you as fast as possible. Georgia is a 16.5-point favorite at Mississippi State. The total, if I can find it here real quick. Where is it? Georgia is about a 16-point favorite at Mississippi State. Number 2, Ohio State in the Big Ten will host Indiana. They are a 40-point favorite. We know they were 38 against Northwestern. It was bad weather. They ended up winning 21-7. But Ohio State, a 40-point favorite versus Indiana. Number 3, Michigan. They're undefeated as well, too. They've got Nebraska. They're 30.5 points at home in the Big House versus Nebraska, who's really struggled this year. Nebraska has 3 wins. In fact, their 3 wins came against pretty inferior competition. Shout out to my buddy Dan Lust, sports attorney. But Nebraska's 3 wins this year have come against Indiana, have come against North Dakota. They lost to Georgia Southern, Oklahoma, Nebraska. They beat Rutgers 14-13 on the road as well, too. So those are the 3 wins for Nebraska, 30.5-point underdog. TCU, the game of the week. TCU at number 4 will visit Austin. They're going to play the University of Texas, Heisman candidate Bijan Robinson. At running back, Max Duggan. Terrific at quarterback last week against Texas Tech. Defense gave up a lot of points. Texas is a 7-point favorite. Not sure if they're going to be able to cover that the way Texas has played. Ewers, at quarterback, has been inconsistent. The defense has given up a lot of points as well, too. But right now, TCU is 7-point underdog at Texas at number 4 in the BCS championship. Tennessee, number 5, after their loss to Georgia. They host Missouri. They're a 20-point favorite against the Missouri Tigers down in Rocky Top. That's where that game will take place tomorrow afternoon. Number 6, Oregon plays number 25, Washington, in a Pac-12 battle. Oregon, after that big thumping against Georgia early in the year, has been nothing but terrific. They're nearly a 2-touchdown favorite, a 13-point favorite against the Washington Huskies. Don't you think that Washington wants to make a move up the BCS charts with a big upset win over Oregon? That could move them up big time. How about Brian Kelly and the LSU Tigers? Took a lot of flack for leaving Notre Dame. Started off bad. Now they've rallied around Daniels, their quarterback. They beat Alabama last week on a 2-point conversion at the end of the game. They move up to number 7. If they win and an Ole Miss loss, I believe it's an Ole Miss loss, will get them the SEC West title. Yes, it's an Ole Miss loss. Both teams have 1 loss, Alabama 2 losses. But LSU beat Alabama and LSU beat Ole Miss. So a win by LSU and a loss by Ole Miss will give them the SEC West title and a spot in the SEC championship game as well, too. All right, so and they are a 3.5-point favorite against an Arkansas team who started off well. They got some good wins. They had a big win against Cincinnati, but their defense has not been shut down, and their quarterback has played well in spots, but the last few weeks they've been off a little bit. And Arkansas comes in at 5-4 in the SEC for their part as well, too. Speaking of Alabama, the number 9 Crimson Tide with 2 losses now. They've fallen. They are going to Mississippi to play the Ole Miss Running Rebels, number 11 in the BCS rankings. Alabama's still getting the respect. 12.5-point favorite is what they are going into Mississippi. We know Mississippi's offense is great. Corral has been terrific under center. The defense has given up a lot of points. They lost to LSU early in the year as a pick-em. Alabama, of course, coming off their 2 losses. They had the loss to Tennessee. They had the loss last week to LSU. Their BCS chances in the top 4 are pretty slim right now with those 2 losses. The fact that LSU has the advantage over them. But they can still come back. I don't know if they'll get the top 4 seed, but they'll be right there. Number 10, Clemson. They're going to host Louisville in an ACC game. Clemson, their only loss against Notre Dame, so they're undefeated in the conference. They are 8-1, 7-0, 8-0 in conference play. Actually, let's check that. Let's make sure I get these things right here. Clemson is 6-0 in conference play, 8-1 overall. Their only loss to Notre Dame. They were 4.5-point favorite going into South Bend, and the Fighting Irish ended up coming out and beating them. They ran the ball all over them. Not the same Clemson team, but the committee's fallen in love with Clemson the last few years. They were number 4 coming into the week. They drop all the way down to number 10. They've got Louisville this week, who's 6-3, 3 losses in conference, a 6.5-point favorite. All right, moving back to the top 25. We've got the UCLA Bruins. They are number 12. They're hosting Arizona. Arizona tomorrow night late on Fox, 10:30 Eastern on the West Coast, Pac-12 late at night. Nearly a 3-touchdown favorite for UCLA. They're a 20-point favorite over the Arizona Wildcats. Now, Arizona put some points up against USC, and 20 may be a lot because this defense does not play a lot of these defenses do not play a lot of defense, is what I meant to say. And UCLA and USC are prime examples of that. USC will have Colorado. They played Colorado last night. We'll get to that in a little bit. But UCLA, Arizona, UCLA a 20-point favorite versus Arizona. And then Utah and Stanford. Number 13, Utah, is hosting Stanford. They're 24-point favorite. They're late night as well in the Pac-12. Stanford's just been awful on offense. Utah can run the ball down your throat. They're very good in Salt Lake City. And 24 points may not be enough after Stanford got drubbed by Washington State last weekend. And then the number 14, Penn State Nittany Lions will host the Maryland Terrapins in another Big Ten game. Penn State 7-2 against a 6-3 Maryland team. Penn State lost to Ohio State last week. 2 weeks ago, then last week they beat up on Indiana 45-14 at Indiana. So coming off a win and a loss, they've got 2 losses right now. And for them to get a chance to move up higher in the BCS, they're going to not only have to take care of Maryland, they're going to have to take care of Maryland pretty big. All right, moving on in the NCAA top 25 college football rankings. North Carolina, number 15, an ACC matchup at Wake Forest. Now, Wake Forest got off to a great start. Sam Hartman back at quarterback this year for them when it looked like he was going to miss the first couple of games. But North Carolina on the ACC network tomorrow night, on ESPN2 tomorrow night. ESPN has Wake Forest at a 54.3% chance to win. North Carolina 8-1 in the ACC. They lead with a record of 5-0 in the ACC Coastal Conference. Wake Forest is 2-3 in conference. They're in the Atlantic Conference. They're down below, but a win against North Carolina would help Wake Forest chances up in that Atlantic Conference. Everybody with 2 losses in that conference, except for Boston College, who has 5 losses. Get to them in a little bit. Syracuse 3-2. We'll get to them in a little bit as well too. But right now, Wake Forest 2-3 in the conference, 6-3 overall in the ACC, 6-3 overall in the NCAA. The ACC big game, UNC at Wake Forest. UNC a 3-point favorite. I think I saw that. Now it's up to a 4-point favorite for Wake Forest. Actually, Wake Forest is a 4-point favorite against North Carolina. They played well at home. I think that's a mismatch. I think North Carolina should be given the points there at Wake Forest. All right. Number 17, number 16, North Carolina State will host Boston College. We just talked about that a little bit. North Carolina State 7-2 versus a 2-7 Boston College team. They're still 16th in the country. 18.5 point spread for North Carolina State over Boston College. The chances, they're still on the board to win the NCAA championship with 2 losses. Save your money. There's no way anybody out of the top 6 is going to win the NCAA championship. that we talked about right now. But for bowl purposes and for standings, this is going to be a pretty good matchup. North Carolina State at home against Boston College. Boston College been terrible on offense, but North Carolina State's without their quarterback Leary now, and they're trying to figure out how to move the offense. They had a tough game 2 Thursdays ago against Virginia where they had to come back and win by a point. Number 17, Tulane. How about that? Conference USA. Tulane and UCF make it the MAC. NCAA football. Where are we at? UCF and Tulane. Tulane a 1-point favorite over UCF at home. UCF 7-2. Tulane 8-1 on the year. Some of their games that Tulane has played to get to this ranking, it's been incredible, the rise for them. They beat Tulsa last week. They beat up on Memphis 2 weeks ago. South Florida on the road. East Carolina's a pretty good team. They beat Houston on the road. Southern Miss, their only loss in the conference. In the conference for them right now. They're going up against the UCF team, who's been as pretty good as well this year. They just came off a win against Cincinnati 2 weeks ago. They beat up on Memphis last week on the road. They were a road favorite, I believe. Yeah, they were a 3-point favorite at Memphis last week. So UCF getting a point at Tulane. They might be stronger in their running game. Tulane, pretty good passing game right now to begin with. But that's number 17, Tulane. Number 22, UCF. Number 19, Kansas State against the Baylor Bears in Waco. Very interesting game here. Kansas State coming off a loss last week. They had Texas on the ropes, ended up losing by 7. Texas was a favorite in that game. They were a 3-point favorite. The game went over 34-27. Martinez did not have a good game. In fact, he got hurt. They were able to make it close. 2 weeks ago, they rolled on Oklahoma State, 48-0. Then they lost to TCU 2 weeks ago as well, too, since TCU's having themselves quite a year, as we were talking about. At that point, when they lost to TCU, they were number 17 and TCU number 8 in the country. That time, of course, we know TCU is number 4. Right now, this game has Baylor at a 2.5-point favorite. The total 52.5. K-State might be the play here. We'll get to that in a little bit in our best bet segment. But Baylor playing pretty well. They are 7-2 right now. They're 6-3 right now. Coming into the game, both teams are 6-3. Standings wise, in the Big 12, this is a big game in the Big 12 for their conference. The TCU Longhorns, of course, 6-0. The TCU Horned Frogs is 6-0. Texas 4-2. Baylor 4-2. Kansas State 4-2. So the top 4 teams still playing for a shot at a Big 12 championship, at least to get into the Big 12 championship game. And TCU right now, the leader in the clubhouse for that scenario. All right, moving on from Kansas State and Baylor, we go to number 20, Notre Dame. How about that win against Clemson? Not an easy team to beat. Clemson's defense has been terrific all year. Navy, we know, has had some big wins as well, too, but they're 6-3. Notre Dame 2 weeks ago beat Syracuse, and then they come back and beat Clemson last week. So quality wins for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Marcus Freeman has got them going a little bit now. 6-3 over Navy's 3-6, a 17-point favorite for the number 20 Fighting Irish against the Midshipmen. Illinois at 21 will host Purdue. They're a 6.5-point favorite. Illinois has played great defensively. They've had some tough losses. They lost early in the year to Indiana in an early season Big Ten game. But they've got Purdue. Purdue's been struggling. O'Connell and Jones, the combination has been there somewhat. But for the rest of the team, they've had a tough time running the ball. But their passing game is where they make their money. Purdue, a 6.5-point underdog. Florida State, 7.5-point favorite at Syracuse. Spoke of Syracuse, started off well. 4-0 to start the season early. They had some comeback wins, one of those against Purdue as well. But 23 Florida State coming in, they are 6-3. They're both 6-3 in the conference. They're both 6-3 overall, but in the conference, they are fighting it out. In the ACC, Florida State at 4-3. They're a game back of Syracuse, North Carolina State. So a win by Florida State could move them up into the second spot, depending on what North Carolina State does tomorrow night. And then Syracuse 3-2. Everybody chasing Clemson in the Atlantic Conference, in the Atlantic Division of the ACC. Clemson at 6-0. Moving on, finally, the number 24 Kentucky Wildcats will be hosting Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt has had an awful year. They've had some pretty good games amongst their losses. They played tight against some teams. But Kentucky, with Will Levis, the quarterback, has been really good. But for their part, they've had a tough time the last few weeks with the lesser teams. They had a chance to beat Ole Miss on the road. They did not get that done. Will Levis threw an interception late that cost him the game. They're 3-3 in conference right now, and Vanderbilt down near the bottom. They're 0-5 in the conference, but they've covered a few of these games. So again, 2 losses behind Tennessee, 3 losses behind Georgia in the SEC East Division. A far cry for Kentucky to move up in the rankings with the win over Vanderbilt, who's 0-5 in conference. All right, that's your top 25. We'll get to each individual conference. We'll highlight some games in each of the conferences before we get to our best bet segment on this NCAA College Football Preview Saturday. Enjoy your games. Hopefully you get some winners today. We'll give you our best bet segments as well, too. We'll be back in a minute with more on the VPartySports Podcast, brought to you by the Brit Sports Pub and Patio in downtown San Jose. Welcome back to the VParty Sports Podcast, brought to you by the Brit Sports Pub and Patio, downtown San Jose. Mention the VParty Sportscast on NFL Sunday Ticket Sundays. Come down and meet us, see our live broadcast, 9:30 a.m. Pacific time to 10:30. The first half hour of the sound will be in the restaurant. The back half of the program will be online on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. By the way, thanks to everybody on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter for your support. We hope to see everybody down there on Sunday. You mentioned the podcast. You get 10% off your entire bill for NFL Sunday Ticket. We got a full week of Week 10 action in the NFL. The Carolina Panthers got a win yesterday. We'll talk about that on the Sunday broadcast as we set up for the continuation of Week 10. We also got a game in Germany between 2 first-place teams. And how about the Minnesota Vikings and the Buffalo Bills playing each other as well, too. All right. You'll see the ticker go by for the top 25 games that we had just talked about. Check your lines. Get the best lines you can possible for the games that you have. Also, the top 25 games that have a lot of meaning BCS-wise, standings-wise, for conference champions-wise, etc. as well. We'll get there to that. All right, outside of the top 25, the ACC, Duke and Virginia Tech. Duke a 9.5-point favorite over Virginia Tech, 6-3 overall to 2-7. Virginia Tech's offense has been not good. They've given up. They played pretty well on defense, but they have not been able to score any points, and Duke has had a pretty good offensive year this year. Pitt and Virginia. Pitt, a 6-point favorite on the road at Virginia. Again, Virginia's had a tough time scoring defensively. Defensively, Virginia has played well. They almost beat North Carolina State on the road a few weeks ago. And then we move on. Georgia Tech and Miami. Miami's just had an awful year. Miami, a 1.5-point underdog to Georgia Tech. Both teams 4-5 overall standings in the ACC. We've gone through this a little bit. Clemson leads the Atlantic 6-0. Syracuse, North Carolina State 3-2. Florida State 4-3. Louisville 3-3. Wake Forest 2-3. 1-5 for Boston College. UNC 5-0 with their big game against Wake Forest. Duke is 3-2. That's why it's a big game for Duke against Virginia Tech. Georgia Tech 3-3. Pitt 2-3. Miami 2-3. And then Virginia Tech and Virginia, both those schools, crosstown rivals, 1-5 each in conference play. All right, we move on to the American Conference. Talked about Cincinnati. Cincinnati already played, but USF and SMU. USF and SMU. SMU is 17.5-point favorite. They've had a pretty good year. They're 5-4. South Florida 1-8 has just been awful. SMU, 4th in the conference with 2 losses. Tulane leading the way at 5-0. UCF at 4-1. That's a big game between Tulane and UCF, both ranked in the top 25. We talked about that a little bit earlier, but that's the game. Cincinnati with only one loss as well, too. And then SMU 3-2 as well. And then Houston and Temple. Houston 3-2 in conference. Temple 1-4 in the conference. Houston a 20-point favorite over Temple. All right, moving on to the Big 12. Obviously, the big game in the Big 12 is the TCU-Texas game in Austin. Texas is 7.5-point favorite going into that game. That's primetime on ABC tomorrow night. Number 4 TCU, number 18 Texas Christian University. The Horned Frogs trying to maintain their number 4 standing. I think they're really good defensively. They've had some holes. They're going to have to stop Bijan Robinson on the ground in order for them to be able to maintain any kind of game plan, because if they fall behind, Max Dugan's been really good, but their defense has been a little Swiss cheese throughout the season. Standings wise, we told you, TCU leading Texas by 2 games, 6-0, 4-2, 4-2, 4-2, 4-2. Texas, Baylor, and Kansas State. Kansas State and Baylor playing each other as well too. Some of the games that are not in the top 25, Oklahoma and West Virginia. Oklahoma's fallen off the rails a little bit. They're 5-4 overall, 3-6 for West Virginia. Conference-wise, Oklahoma 2-4, West Virginia 1-5. Oklahoma an 8-point favorite on the road at West Virginia. Interesting game in Stillwater. Oklahoma State is a home underdog. Remember when they were number 11? They got up to number 8 earlier in the year, and then they got blown out 3 straight games. 2-4 in conference play. 3-3 in conference play. And Iowa State 1-5 in conference play. Yet Iowa State favored at Oklahoma State, 1.5-point favorite for Iowa State at Oklahoma State. And then Kansas at Texas Tech. Kansas bowl eligible after their win last week. Texas Tech nearly pulled off the upset against TCU. Texas Tech a 3.5-point favorite over Kansas. 6-3 overall for Kansas, 4-5 for Texas Tech. We said Kansas is 3-3, and then Texas Tech 2-4. So a big game for bragging rights there. But congratulations to the Kansas Jayhawks for becoming bowl eligible. Moving on to the Big Ten, Michigan State and Rutgers. Michigan State a 10-point favorite. We know about the suspensions. The win last week at Illinois, a big win coming off the loss to Michigan 2 weeks ago. But Rutgers, defensively, they've been good. They have not been able to score points. A 10-point favorite for Michigan State over Rutgers. Both are 4-5. Michigan State 2-4. Conference play, Rutgers 1-5 in the conference. In other games, Wisconsin, Iowa, that's an even game. That's a pick 'em game. Iowa, great defense all year, no offense. Wisconsin's been inconsistent all year. The Wisconsin Badgers are 3-3. They're a game back of Illinois in the West Conference. Meanwhile, Iowa is 3-3 as well too. So everybody's still in it in the West. Illinois leads the West at 4-2. They're ranked 21st in the country. We said that they've got where are they? They've got Purdue this weekend as well too. They're a 6.5-point favorite. But Illinois, Wisconsin, Purdue, Iowa, Minnesota, all 3-3. Illinois 4-2. So a lot of things, a lot of shakeup could still happen in that West Division. But let's face it, that West Division has got to go up against a conference championship that's going to feature either Michigan or Ohio State, depending on who wins that game in the Horseshoe in 2 weeks on Thanksgiving Saturday. All right, moving on to the Mountain West Conference. Not a lot to say about the Mountain West Conference. I bring up the Mountain West Conference because it's my conference, with San Jose State being the alumni. Air Force, New Mexico State. Air Force, a 21.5-point favorite. They run the ball real well. You know about the triple option, the wing formation. New Mexico has had a tough time scoring this year, but New Mexico 0-5 in conference. Air Force 2-3, 21-point favorite. Seems to be about right. The Colorado State Rams are going to visit Wyoming. Wyoming in the Mountain Division, 4-1. They're a game back of Boise, who's 5-0. We'll get to Boise in a second. Wyoming, an 8.5-point favorite at Colorado State. Colorado State in conference, 2-3 so far this year. Overall, 2-7. So they've had some good success in the conference. 8.5 points at home. They're getting at home against the Wyoming Cowboys. Reno and Boise State. We talked about Boise State. They are 5-0. They lead the Mountain. They've only given up 71 points in conference to 174 points scored. 5-0. The point spread for Boise State on the road at Nevada. 21-point favorite, as Boise State will go in as a 3-touchdown favorite. That game late night tomorrow night. My Spartans are going to San Diego State. San Jose State, a 2.5-point favorite. That game will be late night as well too on FS1. San Jose State trying to compete with Fresno State. Both at 4-1. The head-to-head goes to Fresno State right now. But defensively, Spartans on top in the conference play. 84 points allowed. That's the fewest amongst all the Western teams in the conference play. The only team that's better than them in points allowed is Boise State. 146 points scored for San Jose State, 84 for San Jose State given up. And San Diego State coming off their victory last week over Fresno. They are 4-1 in the conference as well too. They're 3-2 after their loss to Fresno State last week. 94 points scored, 98 allowed. They're 5-4 overall. Seems about right. San Jose State favored by 2.5. All right, then Utah State and Hawaii late night. Hawaii an 11-point favorite. Hawaii 2-8. You know how tough it is to play in Hawaii. For all those that wait for those late night Hawaii games after a day of good luck or bad luck, you try and get that one last game with Utah State. Utah State overall is 3-2. They're 2 games back of Boise, 1 back of Wyoming. And then Hawaii 1-4 in conference play. They're minus 40 in point differential. The Pac-12, 2 games that are non-top 25 games. Washington State will go to Arizona State. Washington State, overall 2-4 in the conference, 5-4 overall. Arizona State 2-4, 3-6. Of course, Herm Edwards got fired. He's back at ESPN right now. They tried to run their program, pro-style offense, and it didn't work out for them as well. Washington State comes in as an 8.5-point favorite at home against Arizona State. Oregon State, a 13.5-point favorite over Cal. Cal visits Corvallis. Oregon State is 3-3 in conference play. Cal 1-5 in conference play. They're minus 39 in point differential. Oregon State plus 16 in point differential. They had a big win early in the year this year going forward. And then, of course, Stanford, Utah, Arizona, UCLA, Colorado, USC played last night. And then Washington, Oregon, the big game, number 6 Oregon against number 25 Washington. Finally, the SEC, you got Florida and South Carolina. Very interesting matchup here in this game. Florida, an 8-point favorite over South Carolina. South Carolina 3-3 in the Eastern Division of the SEC. They're behind Tennessee and Georgia. Meanwhile, Florida is 2-4. They're a game back. They still are the 8-point favorite here over South Carolina. South Carolina's given up 180 points, only scored 139. They had a tough loss to Missouri 2 weeks ago at home when they were favored. Florida, of course, came off that victory last week. They had a victory over Texas A&M where they just dominated running the ball. If they can run the ball in South Carolina, they've got a good shot to cover this 8 points. And then Auburn, we've already seen the coaching change at Auburn, a 1.5-point spread over Texas A&M. Texas A&M was favored by 2 last week over Florida. They ended up getting beat in the second half. Auburn, a 1.5-point favorite, standings-wise. Auburn, 1-5 conference play. They're both 1-5 in conference play right now. So it's going to be a game that really doesn't have any impact on anything other than the fans of Texas A&M and Auburn. So far we go. All right, when we come back in 30 seconds, we'll get our best bet segment in for college football for Saturday. Don't forget, on Sundays, we'll be at the Brit Sports Pub and Patio, 173 West Santa Clara Street, downtown San Jose, as we welcome you into the continuation of Week 10. Mention the podcast, come down and see us live. If not, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. The Brit Sports Pub and Patio in downtown San Jose, 10% off your entire bill if you mention the podcast. Back in 30 seconds with our best bet segment of the day. VPartySports Podcast. I'm your host, VParty. We're sponsored by the Brit Sports Pub and Patio, downtown San Jose. Check out their happy hour specials daily, music nights with the DJ, of course, NFL Sunday Ticket, all your NBA, NHL, college football action as well. But Sunday Ticket, come on down, see the live podcast. Yours truly, VParty and the VPartySports Podcast. Mention the podcast all during NFL Sunday Ticket Sundays and receive 10% off your entire bill. All right. What you've been waiting for, the best bet segment of the day for Saturday. Here we go. Tennessee Volunteers taking on the Missouri Tigers, laying almost 3 touchdowns. I think the game against Georgia last week kind of exposed Tennessee a little bit, but Georgia's really good. Missouri's had trouble on offense. They just re-signed their coach, Eli Drinkwater, for 2 more years, so they've got good things going on in Columbia, Missouri. But Tennessee at 20 and Hooker at quarterback, Heisman candidate. The loss to Georgia may have hurt that a little bit, but Tennessee minus 20 is your play there. Clemson in the ACC hosting Louisville, 6.5-point favorite. The loss to Notre Dame may be an aberration. Louisville is no Notre Dame. They can't run the ball. Malik Cunningham has not had as good a year as he's had last year. The defense has given up a lot of points, and Clemson can run the ball, and defensively they are very solid. They just made a couple of mistakes against Notre Dame, their only loss of the year. They did have a tough time early in the year, 14-point favorite against Syracuse early in the year. They did win that game to stay where they are, but they're number 10 in the BCS rankings, and they're 6.5-point favorites over Louisville. Take the Clemson Tigers minus 6.5. Now, Kansas State and Baylor, I kind of waffled on this one. It's a good Big 12 game. K-State's still ranked in the top 25. They're 17. Baylor plays very well at home, but they've been inconsistent from a point scoring standpoint. They beat Iowa State on the road. They barely lost to BYU on the road. At home, they're better. But I just think Adrian Martinez, if he's healthy, now check the injury report. If Adrian Martinez is not playing, then this is a big deal. Plus 2.5 points for Kansas State. He's a game-time decision. Looks like he will play, but plus 2.5 at Baylor. You may even want to buy a 0.5 point to get it to 3. But Kansas State plus 2.5 over Baylor. How about the Oregon Ducks? They are number 6 in the country. Their opening day loss to Georgia was a thumping for Bo Nix, who spent a lot of time in the SEC, saw what the Georgia Bulldogs can do. But they've been able to manage their way back. Now they're a 13-point favorite against number 25, Washington. I can't see anybody stopping them. I know defense has been very questionable in the Pac-12 this year, but I got to think Oregon's going to lay the 13 and lay the wood on Washington, who can't stop anybody. 13-point favorite for Oregon. Lay the 13, take the Ducks. TCU, the Horned Frogs, they're going into Austin. 7.5-point underdog. They're number 4 in the country. No defense has been an issue, but if they can somehow stop the running game, which I think they can, because defensively their secondary is very good against Quinn Ewers and the Texas quarterback who's been inconsistent. But if Bijan Robinson goes off and runs all over him, it's going to be lights out early. But I got a feeling Texas Christian University, the Horned Frogs, TCU, Sonny Dykes has got them going. Defensively is going to be the key to stop Bijan Robinson. On offense, get that running game contained because Max Duggan can put up 30 points a game for the Horned Frogs. TCU plus 7.5 against Texas in Austin. Could be a big upset as well, too. Finally, Louisiana State University, LSU, Brian Kelly. A lot of flack early in the year for the losses he had. Now he's come back. They beat Alabama. They beat Ole Miss. They're leading the Western Division of the SEC. They're a 3.5-point favorite against Arkansas, who got off to a solid start, but now they're running the ball well. Daniels is responsible for 7 touchdowns in the last 3 games, no interceptions. They've been able to put points on the board, and certainly that 2-point conversion against Alabama to get the win brought them back up. They were a 13.5-point underdog against Alabama last week at home. Did not see that coming. That was an easy play for LSU. But I think they go on the road. You lay the 3.5 for LSU, and you get the victory. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games on Saturday for me in the NCAA. I look to have a good day today. Keep following me on Twitter. Keep following me on Instagram. Keep following me on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube as well. We're doing our show 4 days a week. We'll have NBA, NHL, college basketball start a little early for college basketball for me right now, but we've got some good games in college basketball coming up as well too. We'll review all that over the weekend with college basketball, but the NBA and NCAA basketball, the NHL, of course, Week 10 of the NFL, we'll review that on Monday as well. Don't forget to join us tomorrow at the Brit Sports Pub and Patio, 173 West Santa Clara Street, downtown San Jose. Sunday ticket all day. The continuation of Week 10 football. Big games in the NFL. We'll preview all the games tomorrow. We'll get you all the injury reports for your fantasy football teams as well. Your sports action, sports viewing, whatever your sports pleasure is. I'm Vasi VParty. Thank you for joining me on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. This has been the VParty Sportscast for today.